Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. The sun is shining. It's going to be an amazing day, an amazing week. Before we get started with our huddle today, I just wanted to remind everybody tomorrow, Stuart Title is putting on a lunch and learn for us. If you haven't registered yet, please check out the Facebook Energy Connect page. There is a link in there to register. But good opportunity to learn more about how Stuart Title can help you with lead gen. So they've got some really cool tools that I've personally used. I know a handful of other agents have used as well. So if you want to attend that, make sure you go to the Energy Facebook Connect page. It's tomorrow, 11 to 1. And again, it's just a learning tool. This is not a CE class. I have to let everybody know that because I've had a lot of questions around that. But it is just another good tool for the toolkit of your real estate business. So please check that out. If you can make it, register on that link and we'll make sure that we get you guys signed up for that. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Hui Lee, and we've had Hui on here before. He is an energy agent. Last time he was on was, I'm going to roughly say maybe about a month and a half ago on the investment side of this. And Hui has done some sub two deals. So I'm going to turn the floor over to him and have him walk us through this. Just a reminder, this is a different way of doing real estate, but it's because we're problem solving it. So we have to do that in the market that we are in and the market that we're going to be walking into. So without further ado, Hui, happy Tuesday, and I'm going to let you take over.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, Joe, can I get a confirmation that my mic is working? Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. First of all, just want to put this out there. This is not a CE course. You will not get CE credits. So just want to get that out of the way. Um, Oh, thank you so much, Joe, for the introduction. So yes, I do have my real estate license, but I market myself more of a real estate investor than a realtor. I'll talk a little bit more why later, but yeah, we'll just dive right into it. So let me share my screen really quick here. All right, can you all see my screen? Perfect. So I'm just gonna leave this on in the edit mode. So basically, subject to is short for sub two is short for subject to existing financing. So today we'll talk about how that works, how that's structured, the legality behind it. Um, so instead of calling this subject to or sub two, I'm going to call this creative financing because the biggest hurdle when it comes to buying a house is the financing. A lot of us thinks, okay, in order to buy a house, you have to go get a new loan, get pre-approved for a loan in order to put in an offer. That is not necessarily always the case. And I'll talk a lot more about how creative financing is such an amazing tool and solution for a lot of sellers out there and investors. And last time I did this with Greater Midwest Realty, I did not have a case study, but however, I have done a few since I last presented with GMR. So I'll take a deeper dive into one of the case studies today. Sorry, something's going around my voice. It's not the best. Um, but yeah, we'll just dive right into it. And at the end, I'll try to keep today's session short. That way, I'll leave some time for questions and comments or anything like that. So creative financing case study, you can actually look this up on the MLS. The number is 633-8263, and the property address is 4330 Girard Avenue North. This property is actually one of my current rentals. And I'll talk about, how I structured this on the sub two deal and how the agent was paid, how the seller was paid, and just the timeline of how quick and how easy and uh, smooth this transaction was. Probably one of my smoothest transactions to date. Um, Excuse me. So seller's history, they bought this house. This house was listed around March of 2022, and they closed May 5th of 2022. They bought the house at 262,900, and I don't know why, but the seller contribution was $2.70. Very odd. But as you can see, the house was originally listed for 250, and they bought it for 263. So right off the bat, what you can see there is they overpaid for their house. Um, but due to rates that they bought it during 2022, it was justifiable because as we all know, there is an inverse relationship between interest rate and house value. So with interest rate being relatively low, it was around 5-6% at the time. Um, the seller or the buyer at the time could buy it a little bit higher than asking. So they bought it about $13,000 above asking. 1 year later, they decided to sell a house because they had to relocate for work. As you can see, originally when they had originally listed it on the market, they tried to list it for 277. Um, reverse math, basically, at the end of the day, why 277? If you take that minus the whole 6%, um, for commission and everything, they were just trying their best to break even from what they bought it for. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily always the case because, you know, um, yes, it could, if they were to sell it at that price, yes, it could cover the commission and everything. But unfortunately, due to rising interest around, 2023, it made it really hard for them to sell. So the house was actually on the market for almost 3 months. It fell out of inspection, or it fell out of inspection contingency twice. Um, the first time was because the buyer got cold feet, and then the second time I forgot exactly what happened. But basically, I went to the agent and I told her, or I explained to her the subject to process and how I am able to buy it. I walked her through the purchase agreement, and by the way, the purchase agreement for the sub two transaction, it is very different from your typical NAR um, purchase agreement. So, but anyway, I won't go too deep into the purchase agreement itself today. I'll just talk about the process, the numbers, and how quick and easy it was. So I closed on the property and just want to give you all a quick run through of how funky and weird the process is. As you can see, the closed price, I bought this at 268,647. Very odd. As you can see, a lot of people, they usually, when they buy a house or when they write up an offer, it's round numbers. And as you can see in this case, I have very, very odd numbers at the end. But the other thing I do want to point out as well is this was off market on 5/26, and it closed on June 7th. So as you can see, they received my offer late May, and we were able to close on this property less than 2 weeks later. So the seller was a distressed seller. They were just like, I'm ready to be done with this house, ready to move on, wouldn't entertain the idea of being a landlord. And I came in and I was like, you know what? I like being a landlord and I have the money to structure this deal and let's talk on it. So a very important thing to that a lot of agent will ask question, or this is a very important question that a lot of agents will ask, how will I get paid? So nice thing on the purchase agreement or on the sub two agreement is we will list how much is paid to the agent. So in this scenario, the agent got paid $9,000 and the seller was able to walk away with $5,000. So we specify all this on the purchase agreement. Again, it is very different from what you typically see. But the other thing I also want to point out is that there are very few title companies that understand subject to. So I just want to use this opportunity to plug Lenserv. I don't know if you guys ever connected with Ashley Sell over at Lenserv, but she works with a lot of investors and she can help um, do transactions that are atypical transactions like this. So If you don't know Ashley, I say reach out to her. She is a wealth of knowledge and a great resource. So if you can't sell a house the traditional way, reach out to her or an investor like me and see how we would structure deals like this. So long story short, yes, the seller got paid 9,000, 5,000 to the seller, and then this is the HUD report. So the seller had some other miscellaneous liens that they had to pay off. So at the end of the day, they were able to walk away with $3,600. So the nice thing about this going back to is not only was I able to buy this at 268, I really was able to suppress the value of the house. Meaning if I had you know, bought it the traditional way, get a new loan or had another agent represent me and actually bought it at the original asking price of 276. If that was the case, it will just bring up the value of all the houses around the neighborhood. But since I was able to structure it this way, I was able to keep the price low. That way, houses won't appreciate due to, or in case someone were to use this as a comp when they're running their CMA down the road. Um, so the other biggest question too is, okay, well, you bought the house subject to, what's going to happen to the existing loan? So how that works is I just go in, log in as the seller, change the account information, and start making payment towards that mortgage or towards that note. So as you can see, this was April 1st of this year. This is the monthly mortgage that I'm paying on the house. In case you're curious, I am renting this out as a Section 8 rental. Rent wise, I am collecting $2,850 after expenses and fees, um, or after management fees and everything. Um, I'm looking at 2,700, and then you subtract this mortgage payment of 2,200. I'm bringing in a cash flow of close to of around $500 a month just from owning this property. Um, so yes, all I do is every time I log in, I see "Welcome Ashley." That is the name of the former seller, and I'm just making payments on her behalf. So now is the fun part where I talk about um the process and help you all visualize what a sub-2 deal visually looks like. So traditional mortgage or traditional process when you buy a house. So you go to the bank and you borrow money from the bank. You sign a note, they put a lien on the house, and the house get deeded to you, and you become the owner of it. And this right here is your mortgage. So as long as there is a mortgage on the house, there will be a lien on the house. So when they say, when they talk about owners or homeowners that own a house free and clear, what they mean is there is no note to the bank and there is no lien on the house from the bank, meaning it's just the owner and the house. That's what that visually that's what free and clear means. Um, so in a contract for deed, so instead of the bank being the bank, the seller becomes the bank. So again, to help you all visualize what a contract for deed is, the seller puts a lien on the house. The buyer signs a note with the seller, and then there is a deed on, or there is a lien on the house. If if the buyer cannot perform on the note, the seller gets the house back, like how the bank would get the house back if you don't pay on your mortgage and the bank foreclose and all that stuff on you. However, if you can buy, sorry, just on my train of thought. However, if you can pay off the note to the seller over time and all that stuff, then once you perform on the note, the seller will sign off on the lien and just say, "Hey, I no longer have a lien on the house. The note was paid off and we are good to go." So long story short, that's how visually this is what a contract for deed looks like. Now, when talking about traditional buying and selling process, um, there most of the time there is a loan left on the house. And you know, most agents will tell you, hey, you got to go get a loan, get pre-approved for a loan. That way we can put in an offer with the pre-approval letter and all that stuff. And that's how a lot of agents do real estate, and that's what a lot of us are familiar with, and how subject to existing financing works is it just cuts out the buyer's loan. So as you can see, what again, going back to how I bought that property on Girard Avenue, is we left the loan in place and I just swap out with the seller. And in my scenario, I was able to cash out her equity. The agent was paid, the seller was able to walk away with some money. Since since I'm an agent, I didn't see a need to take that 2.7% because I would ultimately be paying myself. So I came in with that nice little discount right off the bat. So FAQ, frequently asked questions. So, you know, when I talk about subject to, a very common thing that gets brought up is this legal? Yes, it is 100% legal. People are doing it all over the country. If it's not legal, I don't think title companies would allow me to close on deals and transactions like this. The second question or concern is you need the bank's approval. That's where the assumption comes in. You know, when they talk about FHA loans being assumable and all that stuff, there is a difference between assuming the loan and taking over the loan, which I talk about down here. So the buyer, aka me, I'm not assuming the loan, I'm taking it over. The difference between that is when they talk about assumable loans, you have to go to the bank, you know, run all your numbers and all that stuff, and the bank will sign off on whether or not you are qualified to take over the loan. In my case, I didn't ask the bank for permission. I just went ahead and took over the loan. The other common thing is due on sale clause, acceleration clause. So this is a scare tactic from the bank. A lot of time the bank will say, hey, you know, like this is illegal or this and that. At the end of the day, when they send due on sale clause and all that stuff, basically what the bank is trying to do is they want you to refinance into a new loan. Why is that? They want to make more money. They want to reset their amortization schedule. They want you to replace probably a lower interest loan with a high interest loan. So I've talked to a lot of investors. So the due on sale clause, it is extremely rare. It doesn't happen as often as you think. And the nice thing too is I talked to Jack Micah. I don't know if you all know him, but he is the president of MNREA, Minnesota Real Estate Association. And he did a class on subject to, and he mentioned that he talked to the owner of some banks, and they said that, you know, the due on sale clause is just a scare tactic for a lot of homeowners. They just want them to refinance and refresh the loan. Honestly, from the bank's perspective, the truth is it's better to have a performing loan than a non-performing loan. Because think of it this way, I'm paying the loan, I'm paying the existing mortgage on time and everything. Why would the bank go after me and cause me so much trouble, even though I'm paying the mortgage on time? It doesn't really make sense. Um, so the another common question too is, what if the buyer stops paying? Very good question. So if the buyer stops paying, of course the buyer would, and if there's still a loan left on the house, then the house would go through the foreclosure process. And for me, from the buyer's perspective, I have a lot of financial interest in this house. As you can see, originally, I already coughed up $14,000 to purchase this house. So for the seller to assume like, oh, you know, like if I can't make money, or if I suddenly can't or don't have a tenant or anything in there, or can't pay the loan, I'm just going to give up my financial interest. That is not necessarily the case. us investors are very different from homeowners. Homeowners, they're in pre-foreclosure or whatever, they will just sit on it and hoping that a solution will fall on their lap. Not always the case. With investors, if they can't pay on a loan, they will do whatever it takes to sell the house to recoup their money, even if it is at a loss. Um, and then another frequently asked question is how will seller get a new loan? So I don't know if you all know this, but you can have up to 10 loans in your name. Conventional FHA or whatever that might be, up to 10 loans. And now that there's DSCR loan products out there, you can have more than 10 loans under your name. So this question about how the seller will get a new loan, that is not a huge concern because from the bank's perspective, let's say the current or the seller of the house, Ashley, let's say she goes out and get a new loan. Of course, the bank will run the credit report. They will see, well, there's an existing loan under her name already. And the easy thing, the thing that's super easy for her is she can send them bank statements and tell them, well, yes, there is a loan under my name, but I'm not paying on it. Therefore, the bank will not account that loan under her name as part of her DTI when running her pre-approval. Um, the other thing too is like, as you all know, with a purchase agreement, you can put whatever the heck you want on it. You can put, you can throw a goat in there. You can say that, okay, I'm going to name my firstborn after a seller or whatever that might be. So what I did to, ease the mind of the seller and all that stuff is we put in these clauses. The first one says, seller and buyer agrees to a balloon payment of full remaining balance due at 60 months, so 5 years from the purchase date. And then we also said that if rates for 30-year fixed rate according to bankrate.com conventional is below 5%, then seller and buyer will extend the balloon date by 60 months. So again, long story short, you can put all the terms and conditions you want to protect the seller. But from my perspective, I am buying this as a rental. I don't plan on defaulting the loan or not paying the loan or anything because this property is bringing in cash flow for me. So why the heck would I default on this? I think this bullet point right here really helps the seller sleep at night. I said that the buyer is a licensed real estate agent in the state of Minnesota. Buyer understands, acknowledges, and agrees to do everything within buyer's power to prevent foreclosure. So again, the seller from their perspective was just, oh my God, if you don't pay on the loan and you foreclose on this house with a loan under my name, I'll never be able to get pre-approved for a house for another 7 years. Well, that's what this language in there is for. So the other thing I want to talk a little bit about too is just this scenario worked smoothly because the seller did not have a lot of equity in the house, meaning, they bought 1 year and they sold the next and they put very, very little down when they purchased the house. But, what if the seller has a lot of equity in the house? How would you structure a deal like this? So for example, let's say the seller bought the house 10 years ago at $100,000 and now it has appreciated to $200,000 and the loan balance is $50,000. So there's another thing I want to put out there is, sellers will sometimes have a hard time understanding the difference between spread and equity. So spread is the difference between selling price minus the current balance loan or the loan balance. So in this case, the spread was 200 minus 50, so 150. Spread is not equity. Equity is less than spread because, let's be real, when you sell a house, you got to pay commission, you got to pay closing costs and all that stuff. So this 150 isn't really 150. So assuming the seller sells the traditional way, and assuming no closing costs, 200,000 minus 6% commission minus the $50,000 loan balance is $138,000. So if the seller were to sell the traditional way at 200, that would be their net proceeds, assuming no closing costs. However, in a subject to slash creative financing deal, instead of the seller walking away with $138,000, what they can do is put their second position against the house as a lien. So this is a little bit more complicated, but we call this in the investing world a hybrid deal, meaning the new buyer would continue to pay the existing loan, and whatever the equity payout so of that 138, the seller and the buyer can come up with how that 138 is paid out over time. That 138 can either be amortized, can either be interest free, um, or whatever that might be. The math comes out to be as creative as you want. So, for example, 138,000 finance over time can amortize the 138, and this is where you negotiate interest and time. Or you can just say, hey, instead of amortization being complicated and all that stuff, let's just make it $150,000 and negotiate monthly payment with or without balloon payment. And then if the buyer defaults, meaning if the buyer can no longer pay the existing loan and pay the seller their equity payout, the seller can foreclose on the house, get the property back, and then repeat the process. So I know the last part was a little bit more complicated, but again, I'm just trying to keep this short and simple. Well, as simple as I could make it in my mind. But I hope this was helpful, and hopefully this will help you all realize like there's more than one way to skin a cat, especially when it comes to real estate. Like yeah, you don't. Yes, you can market a house, sell a house, and make it look all pretty. But when you come with creative financing, it just expedite the process. It makes things so much more easier because you don't have to go through the bank or loan, or yeah, you don't have to go to a bank, like beg them for a loan, and do all the pre-approval and all that crazy stuff. Um, so long story short, this is just a really creative method of buying a house, that I've done before, that hundreds and thousands of investors are currently doing right now, and I just want you all to know about it. So yeah, if you have a property that is not selling because of today's rate, let me know. I'd love to buy it.
Hui, can I ask you, just generalized, when you see something like this, how do you start the conversation with the seller to talk to them about sub twos? Like, what questions are you asking, and how are you getting them to be comfortable with this process?
Yes, very, very good question. The so I want to start out by addressing the comfortable. It all depends. Everyone is very different, and some people are comfortable with their loan out there, and some aren't. And it's all about perspective. So how do I start the conversation is I ask either the seller or the agent, what's more important to the seller, time or money? If if it's time, then I'll come in and say, hey, I can structure this on a subject to, and depending on the equity, I can either pay them out or we can agree to some sort of loan payment over time. Um, but if it's money that they're after, I can also structure this on a subject to as well. Because people look at money such surface level. Um, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was negotiating with the seller. She is in a position where her house is not livable. It needs about like $10,000 of work, and she bought it for 170, and she bought it for 170 like 4 years ago, and she was willing to sell it to me for 180 cash. And to me, the number just didn't make sense because I wouldn't, need to get a bank and all that stuff. Instead, I offered her $250,000. Now, why the heck would I do that? because to me, I negotiate on terms, not price. If the seller wants a certain price, then I ask them, if you accept my terms, I'll accept your price. My terms being, let's get you a down payment, let's get you a monthly payment. Um, so that's one way to go about this. But the other, the comfortability, it's really quite hard to gauge because I'm working or I'm trying to negotiate this other deal for my client. So long story short, the seller bought the house for 420, put in $40,000 of work, and he's trying to sell it for 440 right now. If you do quick math, you know he is losing a ton of money. So, and he had a really big down payment, I think about $60,000. So currently, my client is very interested in this house. And the seller, I've been talking to the seller and I said, hey, if we were to buy your house and doing subject to and all this stuff, we're able to cash you out because my client has $70,000 that he can pay out to the seller. So in that case, oh, my screen is still sharing. In that case, the buyer becomes the owner and the seller it's this theoretically, let's say we do sell this the sub two way, the seller would get his equity and he would move on. The only con to this is that the seller's loan is still or the loan is still in the seller's name. So his concern was, well, what if your buyer defaults on my loan? Again, very, very common question. What I try to communicate to him, and yet he's still not comfortable with this, is that you have cashed out your equity. My client will be into this property with $70,000. Do you think he would let the house foreclose and lose that $70,000? Probably not. The other thing too is the current loan right now, it's 2.75%. It's an ARM loan, and he has 5 years left on the ARM loan, but still 2.75%. And I told him, I was like, sir, even if you try to sell it at 440 in today's rate, you're lucky if you sell this at 235 or 435 or 430 due to today's rate. If you structure this on a subject to loan, not only can we close in 2 weeks because my client has a large sum of money that he can cash you out, it's a win-win for everyone. My client gets to assume this 2.75% rate for the next 5 years. After that, yes, it's going to change, but if he can make significant principal payment towards the loan while it's that low, by the time that the rate starts changing, his mortgage won't change all that much. So yeah, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent, but Joe, does that answer your question?
It does. I think the biggest hurdle to jump through with this process is just explaining it to the client. But the one thing that I wrote down, which I absolutely love, time or money. Like it's like what works. So like
Yep.
that, I'm like, that's actually a really good like cue question to ask even sellers, like
Yeah.
what's the objective here? Are you okay? Leaving it on the market, waiting, doing that, or do you need to get out? It kind of sounds like in a way this is those distressed people who, like you had said, you had bought that property because they bought it, but they were, doing a job change. So it was something that needed to happen.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. I think the biggest thing is just explaining it and making it a win-win situation for everybody.
Exactly. And that's what I tell a lot of sellers too. They think like, oh, you're scamming me, you're this and that. And I think it's so funny that people automatically assume something is a scam because they don't fully understand the process. And this is also why I try to get a like physical meeting with sellers because I can, draw out what a sub two agreement looks like and how that works because, for a loan to replace another loan, no one's winning here. The only winner is the bank because they're resetting the amortization schedule. In my case, from my standpoint with the seller with the house at 440, it's like, sir, you've already done the significant legwork. You've already paid off, the first 2 years of the amortization schedule, whereas was interest heavy. It's a win-win because we get to take over a 2.75% mortgage. Like, who gets that these days? Um, so yeah, it's and yeah, that's how I approach all the every sellers out there. I ask them what's more important, time or money. If it's time, then that's where okay, you're gonna hate hearing this, but I'm gonna lowball you because that's the only way that you can get out of this house quick. Um, if it's money that they want, honestly, like if the house is worth, let's say, $200,000 and they want it for 250, I'll even agree to it because to me it's they want this dollar amount, but to me I would, if that's what they want, I would negotiate on terms because technically if I can buy a house again that's overpriced, but if it's owned free and clear, I don't have to pay interest to the bank. I don't have to pay amortization schedule. All my payments would be directly principal payment towards the loan. Um, Again, just all sellers are very different, and it's just hard to explain it to sellers, even though there's been a lot of times where it's like I have to dumb it down or explain it to as if I'm explaining it to a third grader. But in reality, most of the time, my biggest hurdle is agents. That's why I want to host this class for agents because agents will say, "Oh, it's illegal. It's not. It can't be done," and all this stuff, just because they haven't seen a transaction like this before. And I think transactions like subject to these creative selling, seller financing deals, it's probably going to happen more and more often if rates keep going up or if it's staying as high as it is right now. Um, and it's funny, again, this is why I was like, sometimes agents get in the way because yesterday I was on the phone with a seller and she was like, talk to my agent. I was like, okay, if you want me to talk to your agent, I'll talk to him, but sometimes agents are not the most realistic, people when it comes to talking subject to deals and all that stuff. So I spoke to the agent and he said, okay, well, she'd be open to you taking over her existing loan. But the thing is, she has a lot of equity. So I asked, well, what do we do with seller carryback? So kind of like that example where we take her equity, put it in second position, and figure out terms, interest, um, whether or not she wants a balloon payment or how long that loan will be amortized over, all that fun stuff. And he asked me, how much do you have down? I said 20,000. I could do more, but I don't want to do more. He said, nope, we won't offer this, we won't accept any offers like that unless it's 20% down. And in my head, I was like, okay, let's be real. When we're helping buyers, we don't even recommend 20% down to our buyers. So why are you like limiting this and just making it harder for her to sell? Because she tried selling it twice and now it's going to go back on the market at the same price. Again, to me, it's like, okay, if you want that price, I'll even give you more money if you accept my terms. Um, so yeah, just a quick glimpse into how investors think. We think very different from um, a lot of people, and sometimes what we do seems a little bit weird, but the math makes sense to us. Um, Again, going back to that lady that wanted to sell her house for 180, and I offered her 230. From an outsider perspective, it's like, okay, why the heck would you offer her 50K above what she's asking? But to me, it's a win-win because instead of me getting a loan and paying the bank a crap ton of money over time, I'm paying the seller $50,000 above what she's asking. I was trying to negotiate, okay, what kind of down payment would you like? What kind of monthly payment you would like to see? Because in a sense, she can turn this house into her pension plan. So, um, yeah, that's that, at least that's how I do real estate business.
I think I'm gonna open up the floor and see if there's any questions for Hui about subject twos or contract for deeds or, the investment side of things. Does anybody have any questions for Hui?
All right.
I have so the subject to and contract for deed, are they similar? Sorry, this thing.
Oh, no, you're good.
My
I was able
computer.
to hear your questions. Um, yes and actually, no, short answer is no. So contract for deed usually happens when the owner owns the house free and clear. That's contract for deed. With subject to, that example I gave earlier with a $138,000 seller finance, that is that's called a seller carryback because the seller is financing their equity over time, but there's still a loan left on the house. So long story short, contract for deed is only truly a contract for deed if the house is owned free and clear. Whereas with the if the seller has significant financing and all that stuff, or if they have significant equity, it's not technically a contract for deed because the house the house will get deeded to the new buyer, but the seller's equity is in second position, meaning if the seller or if the new buyer, somehow comes in, trashes the property, and drastically brings down the house value, and they go to sell it down the road, the first person to get their payout is the bank. And then the second payout is the seller because they have their equity in second position. If somehow the buyer comes in and again, that house example as at $200,000, let's say, they come in, they trash the place, and then they sell the house for $150,000. So the bank would get paid out first, and whatever is left will get paid out to the seller. And with the seller being in second position, the only danger is that, yeah, they don't get paid out their full 138. But you look at it, if they amortize it, they're gonna get more than 138 over time. Um, so Jan, did that answer your question or did I make it more confusing than it needed to be?
It did somewhat. I need to get your information. So I had this client who got into a contract for deed in 2022,
Mhm.
but um she completely misunderstood the whole contract for deed that she had, which we all know at that time the interest rate was low, but on her amortization it says 6.5%. And what she thought was like how you explained earlier, where it was to just pay the principal and not the loan, where she thought she was just completely paying the principal,
Mhm.
and that wasn't the case. So the whole thing is a mess, and I'm trying to understand it. So I might have to talk to you later about it to
Yeah, for
see.
sure. For sure.
Mhm.
And that sorry to interrupt. That is a very, very common misconception when it comes to owning a house. People, oh, it's so funny when I hear people talk about like, oh, I bought, a house for $200,000, did $10,000 down. My mortgage payment is 2,000. So, I've been paying it for 2 years, so my loan's probably at 150 right now. No, that's not the case. If you like fully understand the math behind the amortization schedule, it is evil. Um,
It
and
is evil.
yeah, it is extremely
I
evil.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't put it any better. It was horrible when she found out. It was like, well, I've been paying 4,500 thinking that her loan just completely went, just
Yeah.
she's almost done with it, but it wasn't the case. So,
You look at it and it's like, wow, I barely made a dent.
yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
that kind of reminds me in a way who we of again like educating the process, like whoever set that up with her obviously did not like educate through the process of it. So
Mhm.
that's I think that's what gives us a bad rap, honestly.
Yep.
It just we need to really educate people around it to make them feel comfortable, so that way, you know, a few years later they're not coming up with, well, I didn't understand that, I didn't know that. Yeah, no, that's the sad part.
It really is the sad part. If anyone is interested, again, I am such a number nerd. I I created this amortization schedule spreadsheet just so um my clients can see the math behind the numbers. So basically, how this spreadsheet works is, you put in a purchase price. Again, let's say $300,000, 10% down. Um, it'll calculate the down payment, the loan balance. So this is assuming 30-year fixed at, let's say, 7%. So what you see here, this 2095, this is just principal and interest. I'm not taking into taxes, insurance, or PMI or HOA or any of that stuff into consideration. This is just principal and interest. But at least what this is showing is that when they're making their payment, as you again, why amortization schedule is evil. Their first mortgage payment, 2095, chances are it's going to be like 2600 if you factor in all the other factors, components of a principal of a mortgage payment. 100 or 1800 of it is going towards the loan as interest, and you're only paying down $258 of the loan. I mean, yeah, sure, it starts slowly creeping up over time, but as you can see, the first like what 10, 15 years or so, it's interest heavy. And then it crosses like a certain threshold where, you where principal payment is the same as interest and all that stuff, but it's all about the math. A lot of people talk about like, I want to pay off my house faster and all that stuff. If that's the case, just make additional payment towards your principal. I don't know if you've seen those videos going around on like TikTok or Instagram where people will talk about like, oh, if you make extra payments towards your mortgage, you'll pay it off faster. Again, to help you visualize, this is what it looks like. So let's say you make 500,000, or sorry, $500 uh, extra towards the principal each month. As you can see, it drastically changes the amortization schedule. Even if you just do it for the first like 10 years or so, it's the break even point, as you can see, it drastically moved up. You're going to pay off the loan faster. um so yeah, that's just the simple math behind it. The other thing I want to point out too is, when people talk about like, oh, I paid off my mortgage, even though I had like 10, 15, or even though I had like 5 years left on it or whatever. Again, to help you visualize it, so if people have like 5 years left of their mortgage, this is where they're at. Yes, I understand that it's nice to be debt free, but from a financial advisor standpoint, take your time, because the amount of interest you're paying the bank is so minimal that towards the end of the loan, it doesn't make sense to rush to pay it off. You're better off taking your money and investing it in whatever the heck you invest in than you rushing to pay off a mortgage towards the end of its cycle. Um,
So are you saying pay more in the beginning versus at the end?
yep, 100% that. Yep. Because again, if let's say down here, as you can see, towards the end of the amortization schedule, you're not paying all that much in interest. Look at this, like 380, 370. But the other thing a lot of people forget to look at when it comes to money is inflation. So yes, I get that, at the beginning of the amortization schedule, you're looking at today's numbers. But once you factor in inflation, 30 years down the road, $300 down like 30 years from now, it's gonna feel like maybe $80 today. Um, so yeah, if you're gonna make extra principal payments, do it aggressively for the first like 5 years, and then just make the bare minimum. Um, again, from a financial advisor's perspective, your house is the cheapest loan that you will ever get. People buy a house in hope of, owning a house free and clear one day, because once you own a house free and clear, the only thing you're paying each month is principal, or sorry, taxes and insurance. And as you all know, living expenses is huge. It takes up on average, 30 to 40% of your take home income. And, people buy a house in hope of owning it free and clear one day, that instead of having their living expenses account for 30% of their living expenses, it becomes like 10% because all they have to pay is just taxes and insurance. Um, Sorry for going off on a tangent on real estate math and money math right there, but hopefully that helps you. Hopefully this will give you some pointers for your clients when it comes to budgeting, financing, and or finances and all that stuff. Um, so
The
yeah,
interesting part around this is, they say that the average person, sells their house every 5 years. I think it's what they say. So if you
yeah,
look at your amortization schedule, 5 years down the road, they really haven't paid that down very
yeah,
far. I mean, that's the mind-blowing thing behind it. So I am glad that you did share this, because again, looking at those amortization, we don't look at it at the closing table, because you get this whole stack of stuff, but
yep,
people don't realize how much money on top of what they paid already for the house,
yep,
they are over those 30 years. So that's really interesting to see.
yeah.
um
The other thing that I find so evil about the amortization schedule is that, again, when you're making mortgage payments, you're making a small dent towards the loan itself. But let's say you missed, or hold on, so let's say after 3 years, from a financial perspective, yeah, you pay down $10,000 towards the loan. But let's say after 6 years, or wait, no, you're looking at 12. So after 3 years, let's say suddenly you lose your job, you can't pay the mortgage anymore, and let's say your mortgage is $2,600 a month. As you can see, after 3 years, you pay down $10,000 towards the loan, but it takes only 4 months of default mortgage payment for you to lose that $10,000. So, when people talk about like, oh, I'm buying a house and this and that, it's like you don't. Some people don't fully understand. Yeah, you can buy a house and pay yourself and all this stuff, but if you start defaulting on your loan, you can lose 3 years of mortgage pay down in 4 to 5 months, and that just boggles my mind. Again, why amortization schedule is so evil. Um,
yeah. Ugh.
yes.
um
Love
I
and leave it.
we just have a few more minutes here. I want to see if there's any other questions for Hui. And then Hui, could you do me a favor in the chat? Could you put contact information for everybody, so they can reach out to you, even if they have, an investment deal that they have questions on? I really do think that, reaching out to Hui and just going over it with him would definitely help.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yes, and please, if you have any like deals where you're like, I don't know how to structure this or any of that stuff, please let me know. I love real estate. I love coming up with creative options like this. And it's one of those again, one of those things where, sellers, yes, they want to cash out, they want to move on and all that stuff. But to me, it's like I'm begging them, like, please be the bank, because instead of I don't want to pay the bank all this money, I want to pay you all this money. So the way I negotiate is going back to that example with the $138,000 of equity. I would the way I would pitch it to the seller is, hey, why don't you amortize this at 3% over time? It's a win-win because instead of me getting a bank at 8%, I'm paying you 3% amortization over time. And that 3% plus however long they want it to be, that can become their pension. You know, it can become their social security payments in a sense because they're not paying towards the house, they're using the house to collect payments. And from an investor perspective, if if whatever my going out money is less than what I can rent it for, it makes sense to me financially. As the youngins would say, the math is math.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Hui, for your time
I have a
again.
question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned there's a difference between a realtor and a financial advisor. And so I like everything that I hear from you. It makes sense. Tell me how to be a better realtor.
Oh my God. First of all, I'm sure you are, I can't see your name. I can only see iPhone. I'm sure you are amazing at what you do. It's so I had this talk with Jill before, and I don't see myself, I don't market myself as a realtor all the time because when people come to me and they say, oh, I want to buy a house, you know, most realtors will be like, all right, you know, you get pre-approved, you do this inspection. No, I sit them down and I ask them, I'm like, why do you want to buy a house? You know, people think, you know, you buying a house is a sign of I've made it, I'm successful. It's like, no, you only should buy a house if your mortgage is less than what your rent is. Like that's the only, like from a financial advisor perspective, that's the only scenario that it makes sense. If your rent is, let's say 1,800 and you buy a house and now your mortgage is like 2,500, for me, it's like renting may make a little bit more sense, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel that way too. When I'm
Yeah.
with a buyer, I go like, well, let's see if we're ready. I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and you talk to your loan officer and I say, they will help you take a look at what's going on in your, you know, your financing now. Maybe you're ready. Maybe there are things to do and they'll show you how to do that, how to
Mhm.
pay this and don't pay that, you know, stuff.
Yep. And yeah, I was saying that it's like every time I sat down with a buyer, instead of walking through the process, I will try to talk about a buying because again, you know, buying may not be the best
Yeah,
situation for them or might not be the
yeah,
best solution for them financially. And when
exactly.
I work with sellers, instead of me trying to sell their house, I'll try to buy their house first. And if I
I
can't buy
know.
it, then it's like, all right, I guess I can help you sell then. Um,
Yeah,
so I'm sure you're already an amazing realtor. I guess the only thing is just, you know, make sure that they buy a house because it makes sense for them financially. Um,
yeah, I agree with you
yep,
completely. Yep.
yep. And
Thank
then
you.
the whole thing with like, you know, if they own a house free and clear, a lot of people will just, you know, oh, I just want to or I just want to cash out my money and move on and all that stuff. And to me, it's like, all right, you're giving the banks or you want the buyer to get a loan from the bank and they're gonna pay the bank so much money over time. And I'm literally like begging these sellers, I'm like, please be my bank. Like, I don't want to pay the bank all this money over time. How about I pay you instead? And to the seller, their standpoint is like, okay, what if you don't pay on time? What if you don't do this and that? And it's like, let me explain the legality. Yes, you know, if I default and can't make the payments anymore, you get the house back. The only thing is it is now your problem again, and now you have to sell it. But on the upside, all the money I've paid to you, you get to keep all of that. And that is if I default.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think a good loan officer is a real educator for
yes,
them too. So, yep.
yep. I agree.
So,
Yeah, I say also be careful too because like everyone has such different perspective when it comes to money. My perspective is, you know, it's okay to be in debt. You know, you can be financially free and be in debt. You can retire and still be in debt. You just have to better understand debt than the typical person. Um, I was talking to a friend of mine about like, as we all know, and again, this is a space for all realtors, so I guess I could say this. North Minneapolis is not the most amazing place when it comes to buying or selling. Honestly, from my perspective as an investor, I would buy a house in that area for $500,000. But from my perspective, it's like, well, if it's $500,000 and I'm making just straight up principal payment towards the seller each month, financially, it makes more sense for me to do it that way than to get a loan and amortize it. As long as I know I'm going to keep the house for a long time. Um, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the
Yep.
thing about us investors. We think very creatively, and sometimes from an outsider's perspective, it's like, are you trying to scam me? This is too good to be true.
No.
But once you cut out the banks and all that stuff, you keep more money between the buyers and the seller. It's a win-win for everyone.
Uh, Yeah, and we do get creative, and it's really makes it fun, where something may
Yeah.
not be able to take place, and then you think and you think and you look around and you find a way to make it work. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it really is. I'm actually trying to like I'm working with with a lady in pre-foreclosure right now. And to her, it's like, oh, I'm gonna file for bankruptcy. And it's like, no, there are so many things you can do. Like bankruptcy is like probably the second to last option that you should do. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, when you get creative, it gets really fun.
Absolutely.
I really
Um,
like having you on. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
thank you, Hui. My one word of advice to all real estate agents out there and in energy especially, problem solve. That is what's going to get you further in real estate, and listening. Honestly, if you listen to your clients, you are going to pick up on so much more. And really don't make it about the money, make it about helping them out of the situation, no matter what the situation is. So again, this is why we bring these type of things up, because we are problem solving through them, because it is going to continue to keep coming up. So all right, we are over time. I want to thank you guys so much. Reminder that if you have not signed up for the free lunch and learn tomorrow from Stewart Title, head over to the Energy Connect page. Again, it's got some great lead gen tools that we're going to use tomorrow. Next week, we have a company coming on called Click Contracts. And it's a really, really simple way to fill out purchase agreements, listings, all of that. I've been using it, and I want to bring that tool to you guys to see if it's something that you guys would like. If anything else, I'm going to put Hui's contact information also on the Energy Connect page, and reach out to him with any of your investing questions. And he's absolutely a good resource that we have here at Energy. So
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
guys so much, and have a great rest of your week. Enjoy that sunshine, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.